And good evening, everyone, and welcome in to Tigers Tonight. I'm your host, John Maddox, joined as always by the hopefully not as technically challenged as John this afternoon, best co-host in all the land, Larry Marley, Brian Moss. Brian, see the hoodie is in full effect up there in Jersey. Is that a reflection of what's going on outdoors?
Yeah, it's a little chilly out, so we to save on the electric bill, we're just going to put on some extra clothing because my goodness, the prices up here are crazy.
Not too bad here. So, how are things over at the palatial Marley Manor here in beautiful scenic crime-free Hernando, Mississippi?
Well, it is going well. And obviously the day that we've had has been a good day. So no, it's good to be back home. I'm still home, and I'm hoping this trend continues till next week. Although I've got to be honest with you, I think next week is going to be a travel Tigers tonight for CTG.
Here in the home office next week, and then unless the hurricane gods decide not to smile upon me again, I will be in Cancun the next week. So anyway, Memphis beats North Texas. Final score 44-34. Guys, it went just like we thought it did, didn't it, Brian?
Yeah, I mean it was somewhat close. What did I say? 38. I mean 44-30. No, 44-27 or 28, something like that. But I don't know. I mean, it's still issues with the offensive line. Third down's an issue, and we'll talk about it later. But yeah, Temple coming up. It's gonna. You're getting into conference play where you can't afford to slip up. So they'll have some things to button up. But hey, Memphis got the win. They did what they were supposed to do. So kudos to them.
And Larry, how about that defense coming up with three turnovers, two pick sixes, first time since 2014, and then the fumble recovery on the 9-yard line, which means the defense literally won you the game and directly led to 21 points.
Absolutely. And, I was really pleased with not just the pressure that we got on Ayun, but I was really pleased with the run blitzes that we did. And I know that they were moderately successful on third downs, but I still thought overall we got a lot of pressure. We generated some turnovers. We generated defensive touchdowns. One of the things also I want to add was that we really didn't get into too many third and short situations. So they were forcing like 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6s, things like that. That was the thing I was most excited about because earlier in the year, we were facing a lot of 3rd and 2s. Those are really tough to stop. And this time we had more 3rd and longs, which is why I think you've seen more success this year on 3rd down than we had last year.
Yeah, the two teams did not exactly put on a third down clinic. They combined to go 5 of 27 on third down. Memphis did not pick up their first third down conversion until I think it was the 8-minute mark of the third quarter. So again, it was a very, very uneven game. That was kind of the talking point, last week against Arkansas State, as Coach Silverfield said, we need to be consistent. We need to get more consistency. And you did not see that on the offensive side of the ball as Memphis was held to just 141 yards passing. And then they ended up picking up 193 yards net on the ground, which, some of it came late, but, no real long. I'm trying to think. I can't remember the longest running play. It wasn't, we didn't have two 70-yard runs or anything like that. It was very much very methodical. Looking here, the longest running play was 30 yards by Seth Hennigan on a scramble on a bootleg. Other than that, it was 13, 15. You had guys, Brandon Thomas, leading rusher, averaged 5.6 yards a carry. I asked Coach Silverfield about that in the post game because that's the first time, Brian, I think we can say that Brandon Thomas looked like Brandon Thomas.
Yeah, there was. I know I pick on the offensive line a lot, though, but there was times where he had some open holes and he took advantage of it. He was shifty. He was powerful. He hit the hole hard. So that's something you definitely want to see going forward. But it was it's just still too inconsistent for me. But they have time to fix that. But yeah, it was really good to see Brandon Thomas, finally be the Brandon Thomas that we all saw last year.
And Larry, conversely, Memphis held UNT to just 102 yards rushing. And this was the number 22 rushing defense in the country, or rushing offense coming in. And I had a couple of people on Twitter say, oh, well, the defense didn't play great. Well, I don't know what else you could have asked for them to do. They scored twice, got a turnover that literally led to a score, held the number 22 rushing team to over 100 yards less than their average. And Larry, that was all on a day when the offense, especially passing, just couldn't get anything going. And you had for the first time, probably, I'm trying to think back to last year. It's all a blur. Probably the first time in a while, Memphis has had to rely on their defense to win them a game, and were successful.
Not only did we, one of the things we talked about, the offense wasn't very consistent. Well, when your defense scores, okay, so you have the other team has the ball, you score, they get the ball back, so it limits your offensive possessions. So anytime that, and the one time we did have, we turned the ball over in the 9, that was a really short possession, which we scored again. So the defense basically, for all intent and purposes, scored 21 points for the Tigers. And so when that happens, and I'm going to get back to the rushing defense here in just a second, but when that happens, it really limits the plays that you have on offense, and because your defense is actually out there doing the offensive job, sort of. So one of the things that you see, the disparity in yardage, as Jeb pointed out, is that the defense was scoring. So that increased the number of possessions that North Texas was going to have over Memphis. This is the way that works. It's just numbers game. The second thing, you brought up the defensive, or our defense against their run game. One of the things that we did in this game was we actually had a safety that came up and they were spying on that run. And so we were playing kind of a single deep cover zone sort of a thing. And I noticed that about midway through the first half, I was like, just like North Texas was shelling. They had 2 safeties over the top the entire game. And basically when the ball was snapped, they turned around and they went 5 yards, 10 yards back. They weren't going to give up anything deep. They were not going to let us beat them deep. And so their game plan was to make us dink and dunk the whole game. Our game plan was like, you know what? If you want to throw on us, we don't think that guy is accurate enough to beat us. We did the same thing to Temple a couple of years ago, if you guys will recall. We said, you know what? That guy cannot beat us. And he ended up throwing like 3 picks. This guy threw 3 picks too. Same exact theory. We spied their running game, said, you're not physical enough to run on us if we put a 7th guy there. And that's what happened, John. And it worked perfectly because they ended up throwing 2 pick sixes and then turned the ball over the 3rd time.
Yeah, they, they kind of did themselves in somewhat, but part of that is Memphis, forced those turnovers. And just kind of a sidebar here, if you've never had a chance to be in a room with Jalen Allen, that dude is something else, man. That dude, he is funny as can be. And, when we asked him about that pick 6, he, his first thing was, hey, that goes to Greg Rubin, because Greg performed the tip drill absolutely perfectly. You're taught as a defensive back, get the ball into the air. Better things happen tend to happen on defense if you get the ball up in the air versus knocking it down when you have a chance. If you don't catch it, tip it up, and credit the Tigers there. And then on the other side, the other interception, Quindell just took advantage of the tight end not running a very good route. He was very kind in post game and said the tight end slipped. I went back and watched it today. Dude rounded his route off and just didn't run the route, didn't put his foot in the ground. And Quindell took it, Xavier took it to the house. But yeah, I thought we did a better job this week getting pressure. Ward brings up a great point. How about Ray Guy, punter of the week, Joe Doyle, 50 yards per punt, had a long of 62, and the Tiger cover team did a great job getting those down without letting those roll into the end zone too. A lot of stuff to fix. I mean, obviously, that sounds like coach speak, but it's almost always true. There are a lot of things to fix, but Bryan, you said if we came out of this stretch of the season at 3-1, that, this was a successful first quarter of the season. And now, looking back, I don't think there's, I don't think there's any regret about the Mississippi State game, because that's not really one, I guess, that you could say, oh, that one got away from us. But some very, very uneven performances. But at the end of the day, and I tell people this all the time, you put the number on the left and the number on the right at the end of the season, and you want more on the left than the right. And Bryan, you're sitting at 3-1, and that's about all you can ask for.
Yeah, during our preseason podcast, when I said, I thought this is where Memphis would be at 3-1, it's, successful start of the season. I expected better performances, but it's still, you're 3-1. You got to be happy about that. And, going into the Temple game, so, and it's not like Memphis has to fix a lot of things. I mean, there's just minor tweaks. Just a little, tighten a screw here, loosen it a little bit over there. So, I mean, there's just little things that need to button up on. But yeah, 3-1 is a heck of a lot better than, what it could have been.
But Larry, I don't know about you, but this very much like the Arkansas State game, where there was not a point in this game that I felt Memphis was going to lose. There were some uneasy moments, but North Texas would get it to one score, and then Memphis would come right back and push it out to another one. So again, very much like Arkansas State, I just didn't feel like Memphis was going to lose the game.
Certainly not after we took the lead and pushed it out. I think it was 20-10, and then they came back and got a late field goal. But we got the 2-score lead going into half. I was like, okay, we have the momentum. Yes, we haven't looked great offensively, but defensively, they really struggled, or they were struggling against our defense. We looked really good defensively. And here was the thing, guys. What we were doing defensively was not something you can out scheme. We were literally out physicaling them on the defensive side. And that's not something that you're going to go in and go, okay, well, all of a sudden this guy's going to be, 3 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier. That's not how this is going to work. And so if you look at how we were playing, we were sort of dominating physically. And the other thing, again, offensively, I thought the running game was sort of got the bad rep here. I thought the running game was fairly effective. One of the things that we have to remember, guys, and you tweeted this out, Bryan, this was the first game that Silverfield had played in temperatures of 90 degrees or higher. Now, obviously, Norvell had done it many times. We all remember UCLA. But point is, this was Silverfield's first go with this. And I think he kind of went into it, okay, it's a hot day. We're bigger, we're more physical. We're just going to beat them up and just sort of make them, sort of wither away. And guys, I got to be honest with you, when it got to 41-20, I really felt like this was about to get to blowout territory. So I'll talk about that in just a second. But yeah, this game really, what his game plan was worked. It worked very well. I actually tweeted you guys a couple times. They're done. And they looked physically beaten several times in this game.
Yeah, and the play I charted out on our premium board, the 9-yard touchdown pass. Everybody talks about running and why it's not why it's important to run. Well, on that drive, Brandon Thomas rushed for 13. He rushed for 3. Let's see, there was Asa Martin got 3. Asa Martin got 2. And then that got Memphis down, and they did a little play action to Asa Martin. Well, when the team is run for 25 yards on the drive, of course that middle linebacker is going to bite in on that play action fake.
Safety too.
Yeah, and you're going to score because and that's why running the ball is so important, especially today and in today's offense, not like back in my day. But in today's offense, you've got to be able to run a little bit because you can't let guys sit back and shell up. And you notice that was the very first time that they kind of got out of their shell a little bit was on that play. They brought the blitzer off the edge, and again, I said this, credit to that's great play design by Tom Cramsey there, to let that guy come free. And, Seth has got to get the ball out quick. And I just thought Memphis did a great job on that play, and they did enough offensively, I think, to win the game. What we're going to do right now is we're going to step aside for just a moment. And when we come back, John DiCarlo from Owl Scoop will join us on the program to talk all things Temple. You're listening and watching Tigers Tonight. Get away from it all? Hey, it's John here with Tropical Getaways Travel. And when I'm not following the Tigers, I help families and groups have their next amazing vacation. Maybe you're looking for a cruise, or maybe it's an all-inclusive resort that you've been dreaming of. Either way, I can help you plan a vacation that fits your budget and your lifestyle. When you're ready to start planning that vacation, give me a call at 901-667-8747. That's 901-667-8747. Or you can visit my website at tropicalgetaways.net. Let's start planning your next amazing vacation. And welcome back into Tigers Tonight. John Maddox, Larry Marley, Brian Moss. It is going to be an absolutely, as you just saw there from our friends over at memphisweather.net, an absolutely gorgeous day on Saturday at the Liberty Bowl. I did it again, dadgummit, Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. It's going to take me 10 years to get used to it. And we're joined now by owlscoop.com publisher John DiCarlo. John, how are you this evening, sir?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on. How you guys doing?
Not too bad. We enjoy having you on each year. This week, the Temple Owls come to town. And so before we get started, Temple's kind of been off to a bit of an uneven start, much like years past. So what's the general mood there in Philadelphia around the Owl program?
I mean, they're rebuilding. I mean, they had, Rod Carey's first season, they were off to a really good start, and they were 8-4, and then they lost to a really good North Carolina team what bowl game was that? The Military Bowl. And then year 2 and year 3 were really bad under Carey. So they're rebuilding under Stan Drayton. 2-2 is about, where I would expect them to be. But I think, they've shown some signs of life. A lot of people are looking at EJ Warner and saying that's Kurt Warner's kid, but he's shown some flashes as an 18-year-old true freshman. He's given them a chance to stay in some games because he's really decisive. He looks the part of a guy who grew up with a father as a Hall of Fame quarterback. So, and their defense is starting to come around too. I think this is going to be their best test, but you're starting to see signs of a team and a program that's buying in, but they've still got a lot of work to do.
Talk about that defense, because I think that's the highlight of this Temple team, especially on third downs. Even though they lost 30 to Duke was only 1 for 9 on third downs. Even against Rutgers, they were only 4 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
How or why is this defense so special right now, or so tough, I should say?
I think they've got a good defensive coordinator in DJ Elliott. He's experienced. He does some different things and different looks with simulated pressures and stuff like that. And it sounds simple, but just some of his best players are really starting to come around. Leighton Jordan looks like potentially that next defensive end that's going to come out of Temple and go to the NFL. I mean, they've had good guys in the past, like Hassan Reddick, Jacob Martin, interior guys, and Leighton's really starting to put it together. He had granted it comes against UMass, it comes against their backup quarterback, but he was backpedaling in coverage and he had a one-handed interception and turned upfield and returned it for a touchdown. Some of these their linebackers are probably the strength of that defense. Jordan McGee in the interior, they run a base 3-4 front, but they're just really disciplined and they're aggressive on third down. That Duke game that you mentioned, I mean, they were terrible in the first half. They looked like a defense that, a lot of week 1 teams that hadn't tackled in preseason camp, and the extra layer of it was that they're learning under a new coordinator and a new scheme. And then in the second half, they only gave up 6 points. And, part of that might have been, Mike Elko and Kevin Johnson, you guys are familiar with, maybe calling a little bit more of a conservative game plan, but they still buckled down in the second half. The game was out of reach by that point, but under Rod Carey last year, that game gets out of hand really quickly. So you started to see some signs there. They beat Lafayette, which they're supposed to do. It's an FCS program. They could have and probably should have beaten Rutgers, but they've just gotten better each week. So I'd say it's the scheme. Coverage, they're getting better. Jalen McMurray, a guy that didn't play a ton of football last year, is, Temple with their program, they do the single digit thing. They give single digits to the guys that they think are the best and toughest players on the team. And he's been really good in coverage. Their safeties are starting to play better. Alex Odom is starting to play better. So I think it's every layer of that defense is starting to play better, starting to get it. Again, I think, Seth Hennigan this will be their biggest test. This will be the best quarterback they faced. They're on the road, but I would say that the defense is playing a heck of a lot better than it was, in the season opener against Duke, which is, simple to say, but that's what you want to see in a rebuilding program, a team and a program in all three phases that look like they're getting better every week.
So talk to me about Stan Drayton. You mentioned Rod Carey, that the program really got down. And so he's got a tough job, not just to rebuild players, but player confidence. So how is that going?
I think it's going well. Rod, I think, just to be totally honest with you, I think Rod just came in and wanted to coach ball and be left alone and kind of do things the way he had done them at Northern Illinois, and that just wasn't going to work. Anybody who has been successful at Temple, whether it's been Al Golden for a short amount of time, Steve Adazio, Jeff Collins just lost his job, but Jeff at least bought in and had, a couple good seasons at Temple. You really, this sounds simple, but you have to recruit well. You have to recruit the right players, but there's still a lot to sell at Temple. They've got a lot of guys in the league, and they do well there when they have assistant coaches that are really bought in, are really hungry about recruiting, and really bond with these players. Now, Rod faced challenges that the previous coaches didn't face with COVID, but they were going to lose a few good players to the portal, but there's a reason why they lost a lot of players to the portal. Maybe even Matt Rule wouldn't have been able to keep Arnold Ebiketie if Penn State wanted to come and get him. But Rod just didn't recruit as well. He didn't buy in as much in terms of the camps, the recruiting camps. So Stan comes in and had to rebuild a program that had gotten a little soft, and that's not Temple's reputation. They've always had a hard-hitting defense. They've put a lot of guys in the league that way. And I think he surrounded himself with assistant coaches that, even if they had never coached at Temple before, they kind of get the vibe of the place. And, and so far, I think it's going well. And they're still sifting through some guys, that maybe played more snaps last year that aren't playing as much now. But you see that with every, coaching change. And he seems to be the CEO type that really is invested in the place and is closer with the players. Both of his coordinators seem to be very well-respected guys. Danny Langsdorff, who's got a lot of experience, got some NFL experience. Like I said, DJ Elliott has got a lot of good experience. He brought back Chris Wiesehan, his offensive line coach, and Chris has his hands full. He's got a young line with the exception of his tackles, but Chris had been at Temple before with Matt Rule, with Jeff Collins, got out of Georgia Tech at the right time. But Chris, all of these guys, I think, know how to recruit to Temple, and the guys just look happier in the building. Last year was a bad season. And ironically enough, when they beat Memphis last year, they looked good. And I thought maybe, just maybe, that was going to be the sign of maybe a turnaround, but they never won after that. And they beat a pretty good Memphis team last year. And I thought, okay, they've still got some signs of life, never won after that. And the players were just so checked out. And it's been a long time since I've seen that at Temple. So Stan had a lot to clean up, but he seems to be a very well-respected guy. I think that, the more that guys learn about him, they know, oh, he coached Ezekiel Elliott. He was with Bijan Robinson at Texas. He's coached Carlos Hyde. He recruited Brian Westbrook to Villanova. So he's got a story, but he at least seems very genuine and just a different vibe, different stuff. And so again, I think that they'll win maybe more than 4 or 5 games this season? Probably not. But that's about what I expected. They've got a lot of depth to rebuild, but it seems to be heading in the right direction so far.
You brought up a good point there. Temple, the hashtag is Temple Tough.
Mhm.
And one thing I noticed looking at the stats is boy, as much as we've maligned the running game at Memphis, Temple's averaging just 92 yards
Yeah.
on the ground. But beyond the offensive line woes and having a young line, what are some of the other challenges they've had in the running game?
I think it's been a mixture of both. I know that sounds like the convenient answer, but I think it was in last week's media availability last Monday. I just asked Stan about that, and he's a former running back himself. He's coached a ton of great running backs, and it is the young line, but he's not afraid. I think he knows as a first year coach. I think he also knows how to deliver criticism without selling out his team. And he said, our guys, I know they're capable of better. Do I think that they have an elite back on the roster right now who's prepared to play in the NFL? Hard to say, but he said these guys have to learn how to run through contact better. So I think that's part of it. But their tackles are pretty solid. Well, Isaac Moore, their left tackle, has been pretty good. Adam Klein had been playing right tackle. They moved him to center last week. It sounds like he might stay there. But Bryce Thoman, their left guard, is young, and he's really struggled. I mean, if you look at the PFF ratings, I mean, he did not grade out well last week. And even on one of EJ Warner's touchdown passes, he got beat pretty cleanly. And he just looks like a young guy who is starting and playing significant snaps for the first time at right guard. Right tackle, James Faminu, is playing there now. Right guard, Wisdom Course, she's very young, or relatively young. So I think it's a little bit of both. Darvon Hubbard might be their best back. He's a Texas A&M transfer. They did mix things up a little bit last week in blending in Quincy Patterson. He had started off at Virginia Tech, then was at North Dakota State last year, and gives them a different element where they can jumpstart things. I would expect to see him, in some packages. So I think it's been a little bit of both. I don't think that they have a stud back there, but I don't think they're being helped by the line either. You've seen some moments where things have started to break, but that's happened against UMass. That's happened against Lafayette. It did not happen against Duke. Didn't happen as much against Rutgers. So obviously, if they can get the run game going this week, that would be huge. I know that statistically, some of Memphis's numbers don't look great, but Stan Drayton was, beyond the coach speak, was very complimentary of what he saw of Memphis's defense. And I think that's been one of the struggles. It's been really, I think, the central thing is like getting the running game going and just finding that consistent, what's our identity on the offensive line. I think they're still very much figuring that out.
Last one for me. In this series, no team has won 2 games in a row. And I started thinking back in the old Big East, Temple and Rutgers could be considered a rivalry. Who's Temple's rivalry now? Who does Temple fans consider, I guess, their closest rival? Would it be Memphis because it's been back and forth?
Maybe, I think like when the game has been in Philly, it's been fairly well attended. And I think, between like the controversial call a couple seasons ago and for a pro sports town, I mean, Temple's never going to draw like the Eagles do. It's just not, it's not like that. But I think the fan base is familiar with, like the good Memphis players of the past. And so I think that people do get up for that game. So yeah, it could be Memphis. Beyond that in the league, I think people get up for like the UCF game, and Rutgers, I think, as a non-conference opponent, maybe. But yeah, I think Memphis might be the as close to anything as they have as a conference rival. I think people are familiar with the roster. I think for as much as Temple has a tradition of being a basketball school, I think, again, ever since Al Golden turned the program around and with what Matt Rule did with it, and again, like, the fan base can wake up on Sundays and see a bunch of Temple guys in the league. And the program, again, it's dipped the past couple of seasons, but it seems to be heading in the right direction. So I think they pay attention to things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. Memphis might be one of the closest things they have to a rival in a, as you guys know, a league that is all over the place geographically.
So you mentioned this EJ Warner in sort of in passing, you lose Mathis, and in steps EJ Warner. And for those who don't know, he's the son of Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner. And talk to us a little bit about EJ. What are we going to look forward to seeing out of him?
I think you're going to look at him and you're going to, he's listed at, I think, 6 feet, 190 pounds. That might be a little generous. He's probably closer to 5'11" or 5'10", but I think in a perfect world, they would have seen more, out of Dwan Mathis. And again, at one point, he was a big time recruit. He was good enough to start at Georgia. And he just, he's had some hardships. He had brain surgery there at Georgia a couple of years ago, and he's been dinged up. And 1 minute he can deliver a great throw. The next minute he looks lost. And I think this staff was not afraid to say, hey, if you're going to put the ball on the ground, we're going to make a change. And I think all the while they were impressed with EJ in preseason camp. And I think it was more than just coach speak. So when you see him, again, the big key is, can this offensive line give him time? Because he does not, in 2.5 games or however long it's been, he stepped in the Lafayette game and they started against Rutgers and started last week. He does not get fazed by pressure, almost to a fault. Like, he will stay in the pocket, and he'll stand there and get drilled if it means going through his progressions. And for a kid who's 18 years old, it's not like, I think they're a little varied offensively, but it's not like this one read RPO offense, like one read and done. I don't know ultimately how mobile he's going to be. I think he's fairly athletic, but he's impressed me so far with how, you hear the coaches say he watches a ton of film, and yeah, he has the benefit of checking in with Kurt Warner every night on Zoom and talking football with him. And it looks like
there are worse resources you could pull from.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I think it's easy to say if he probably, I think he had Colorado State, a few other offers. It's probably easy to say if he was 6'2", 6'3", he might've gotten some better offers, but he throws a pretty good ball. He doesn't have a weak arm. And the throw he put on Adonicus Sanders last week against UMass, again, you can say, well, it came against UMass. The coverage was tight, 50-yard throw, and it was a perfect throw. He dropped another one to Sanders. He had a little bit of a rough start. He had 2 interceptions, but he can really place the ball. And he does. When you look at him, you say, okay, that kind of makes sense. I'm sure he's got a ton of work ahead of him, but you'll see a guy that weathers pressure, that doesn't get too fazed by pressure. And again, I think the concern is they're very young and very inexperienced in the interior of that offensive line. And that's the concern. But if he gets the time to throw, he more often than not has put the ball where it's needed to be. I thought I might have seen him this year. I thought Mathis would have been competent to get another season in, but like I said, I think they had seen enough, and he's really been impressive so far. I don't expect him to get fazed by being on the road. Again, even when you talk to him, he just seems like a pretty settled kid. Again, not too many players. There are obviously guys that play in college football that have had fathers who have played in the game, but he kind of looks and carries himself like a guy who's grown up with Kurt Warner, but not so much in an arrogant way. His teammates really respect him. So I think you'll see a guy that doesn't get fazed too much. But again, this is another test for him, a road game, conference play, and we'll see how he handles this week.
One more before we let you go. I make Larry roll his eyes every week. Special teams. Tell us about the Temple special teams and what we can expect out of the kickers.
The kickers, Rory Bell's only attempted 2 field goals. He's missed both of them. Last year, I think he hit 9 of 17 last year. Ironically, in the game where they got their clocks absolutely cleaned by obviously a very good Cincinnati game, he knocked home a 54-yard kick. And, he's not anything close to like what they had with Brandon McManus several seasons ago, but he's only attempted 2 field goals. He's shown the proficiency to hit some decent kicks. Just don't know how good he's going to be this year. They were so bad on special teams under the past couple of years, and it was just mystifying how much the previous staff, they could say what they want. They weren't aggressive in going after kicks. They weren't aggressive in returning punts. They're still struggling a bit in the return game. Ahmad Anderson has been indecisive, but again, it happened against Lafayette, but Devon Fox blocked 3 punts a couple weeks ago, and they just needed something like that. Again, regardless of who you're doing it against, it showed that they're not afraid to be aggressive in that phase of the game. And they need that because, again, they are rebuilding, they're taking steps, and maybe that's going to be a difference in the, in the game. But, if it comes down to a game-winning kick, I'm not sure how dependable Roy Bell is going to be. We'll see. Again, he doesn't have a weak leg, but again, small sample size for him this year, so we'll have to see. Mackenzie Morgan, their punter, has been pretty solid. I mean, he's kind of able to flip the field for him if need be. He's a rugby style kicker, so I mean, he can punt it straight out of a straightforward snap, but he can move around a little bit. He's been pretty good for him, but Roy Bell's still like a bit of a question mark at this point.
So, John, tell everybody how they can keep up with you and learn more about Temple this week.
You can follow us. You can follow me on Twitter at DiCarlo, and then our OwlScoop Twitter account is OwlScoop_com. And we'll have all the standard stuff, game preview heading up to the leading up to the game. And we do a podcast every week, like you guys do, called The Scoop, which we'll record tomorrow, and it'll probably be out Wednesday night or Thursday morning.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Looking forward to Saturday.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Appreciate it.
John DiCarlo from OwlScoop.com, our friends at Temple. And, I've had, I don't know, I go back and forth like I have, I've said, oh, we're going to be great. We're going to blow this team out of the water. And then we come out and we just struggle. But Bryan, this is one we've got to assert some authority in this game because, I think John was very kind there. Temple has just not been very good, and they're not, they make up for being small by being slow. And this is a team Memphis really needs to come out and set a tone with and dominate a little bit.
They have to. When you take a look at the stats, and I mentioned Temple's defense, they have a decent defense. They held Duke 1 of 9 on third downs. Rutgers 4 of 14. I know Lafayette and UMass are not the greatest teams, but UMass, it was 3 of 18, and Lafayette was 3 of 16. So, I think Memphis has to be better on third down. 2 for 12, like they were last week against North Texas. That's not going to cut it. To me, Temple's defense is better than North Texas, so I don't think it's going to be if Memphis is not playing their best, I'd say watch out because Temple can come up and bite them just like they did last year. So it's a winnable game for Temple, but it's not one they should win. Memphis really should. Really should win this one easily, but I'm just hesitant because this series, like I said, it's been win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. Each team, they just alternate the wins. No team has won back-to-back games. So that favors Memphis this time. But Memphis has some things to clean up for sure.
Jeb just asked about the O-line. We aren't privy to injury news. Everybody is day to day. Just like we all are. So we don't know.
Yeah, but you can see some things on the depth chart, like Pounders.
Yeah.
He got moved from starter to backup. So, I mean, that kind of tells you he may not be 100% yet.
Yeah, and then Jonah Gamble still on the depth chart, Austin Myers, but all that's over on the message board. It was a just kind of a, what do they call that, a shell game, it seems like, of players today. Larry, as I look at this, if I told you a team was 7 of 7 in the red zone this year with touchdowns, but they were 10th in passing, 9th in passing, 11th in rushing, and 10th in scoring offense. I mean, I know I went to a Memphis City school, but that math just does not add up. This is a team that has really struggled to score until they get in the red zone, and then they are very good once they get there.
Well, that probably is indicative of you have as he was saying, you have a fairly accurate quarterback. You have guys that can run good routes, and then you may just have a big giant bruising running back who can't run more than 10 yards, but man, he's tough to bring down. I mean, there's a combination of things there. And so what I'm not as concerned about them taking the ball and driving 80 yards on our defense. I don't see that. I mean, that's not a concern. What we have to win here, guys, is we have to make them drive, kick the ball through the end zone, make them get to the 25, drive the length of the field, see if they can do that. Do what Joe Doyle did last week. Win the field position game, force them into long drives, and then don't turn the ball over and give them short field situations. If you do those things, I think this is a fairly comfortable game. I just don't see Temple being able to stay on the field, and our offense, I know their defense is good, but our offense is better. Guys, would you not agree this is probably the best offense they've seen all year? I don't know if it's better than Rutgers, but probably.
Yeah, oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, it's better.
No
So
offense,
I
Brian.
mean, I think our offense will definitely score enough. I can't see. Again, don't give them short fields. Don't turn the ball over in the red zone. And when you get scoring opportunities, score. And I think in this game will take care of itself. I see this playing out very similarly, score wise, maybe not in the same way that the North Texas game did, with us just scoring and adding on.
Yeah, I don't think we can come out and sputter in this game. I think that, and I can tell you that just by the looks on the faces in the press conference, especially Seth, he was not happy with his performance. So I think, I look for the Memphis offense to come out a little stronger this week than last. And this is just a game, guys, where we just can't help Temple. Like Jeb just said, you got to keep them pinned back. We can't do what we did in the first half, whatever year it was that, I guess that was 2019. Yeah, Joey caught it. Like, people forget we threw 3 interceptions in the first half. Like, that's just what we cannot do. We cannot help them. They are not a very good team, and we are not good enough to overcome helping them. Like, we just can't. Seth finally threw his first interception last week, but that was out past midfield. So, and North Texas just couldn't take advantage of it. So to me, that's the thing. Like, we can't turn the ball over in our own end and give a Temple offense, again, that's 7 of 7 in the red zone. Their problem has been getting there. We don't need to put them in the red zone. So if we do turn it over, it's all about where we turn things over. So we've got an 11 a.m. kick, breakfast with the Tigers. It's going to be on ESPNU. And let's see. So 11 a.m., carry the 1. Let's say about 2:34 p.m., Brian. The Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium scoreboard will say.
Oh, man. I want to say it's going to be a close game because of Temple's defense. I mean, Temple's opponents are only converting 19.5% of the time on third downs. But I'm going to be a little optimistic. I normally am anyway. So I'm going to say Memphis gets it done, and I will put Memphis winning 38-17.
Mr. Morley?
I'm going to go 48-17. Memphis comes out early and often. The only question I have on this is, we got up 41-20 last week, and we really pulled back the reins, and ended up kicking a field goal, but late. But that was really it, and we could have really run that score up, guys. I do believe that. I know our offense we're beating up the offense for not playing well last week, but I think once we got up 21 points, we pulled the reins back on that game. We do not need to do that. If we get up 35-10, something like that, we need to keep, especially midway through the third quarter, we got to keep going. We don't need to give them any signs of life.
Well, my hesitation with all this is, number one, we have not really shown ourselves to be a team to do that. And number two, we are allowed to, the team is not, but let's be real. You're playing 18 to 22-year-old kids. Next Friday, the Houston Cougars and their idiot of a coach, Dana Holgerson, come to town. What a dunderhead that guy is. Anyway, So that's my only thought process here. I'm going to go 28-10 because I just don't think Memphis feels like they have to score 50 or 60. Like, I think if they can get in the upper 20s, they're going to win the game. And again, it's just like the other games we've had this year, right, guys? Do you put a bunch on tape in a game that you don't need to put on tape, or do you put everything on tape so that teams now always have something in the back of their head to think about? So I just think it could go either way. I'm just going to say 28-10. It's really arbitrary. I just don't feel like this is a game Memphis is going to come out and, while it would be great to win 52-14, I just don't know that Ryan's teams are built that way. And I don't know that that's the mentality of Tom Cramsey or the mentality of Ryan Silverfield. It's, let's get the job done, get everybody off the field, get no one hurt, and on to the next week. I think this is a game where that's kind of going to be the prevailing wind. Now, are Tiger fans going to be happy if it's 21-3 at the half and Memphis has not done anything off it? No, but you know what? I'm happy anytime there's a one on the left-hand side. And Jeb's right. You can't win this week worrying about next week, but I think that you coach that way, but it's one or the other, right? Like, you either coach to go all in, and there we go. There's the slogan.
You play to win the game.
That's right. Who's also now not playing to win any games. He's fired again. But you either go all in and put a bunch of stuff on tape, or you do enough to get the job done when you know that now, after this week, Houston, East Carolina, a very good, I thought very good, Tulane team.
Hey, go Southern Miss.
That's right. Southern to the top, baby. Tulane goes and beats Kansas State and then comes home and loses to an abysmal Southern Mississippi team. All apologies, Larry.
They have no quarterback. No,
they managed to win a game, but now you're going to get into the meteor schedule, and you guys are right. You don't win this week thinking about next week, but this is a game you can win without having to throw the kitchen sink at everything. And look, let's just be real. The guys are not going to be fired up to play Temple. The offense is going to be fired up, I think, a little bit, just to kind of shake off a little bit of that rust and say, hey, we're still here. And maybe, the defense doesn't have to do as much. But I don't know. I just feel like this is going to be a low scoring, get her done type of game where you're just doing the things you need to do to get out of there with a win. All right, so I don't want to spend too long on this because, again, don't forget, tomorrow night we've got the basketball schedule breakdown with myself and Leon Taylor, newest member of our team.
Are you saying something else happened today? What happened?
Yeah. I mean, who knew? And Leon and Isaac and I will be, Isaac Simpson and I will be breaking down the basketball schedule. So, too bad we don't have anything else to talk about. No, seriously, Memphis got their response from the IARP today, which is has been dissolved by the NCAA now, and they said today though that they're going to drag out probably till the middle of next year to get all their cases out of the way, which is just patently ridiculous. Louisville's been waiting 5 years. LSU's on year 3, I believe. Yesterday, the FBI sting was 3 or 4 years ago yesterday, and it's just ridiculous.
I just remember we had a show that day and we were like, oh man, this is going to be, and here we are 4 years later, still like, let me put it this way. My kids were young enough. I took them to the fair and I got one in college. So there you
But so Memphis gets the results back from the IARP. And look, I'm in the interest of transparency. I wrote an article today about it. I had to erase the entire article and start over again because I just knew we were going to get the hammer. Like, right, Brian? Like, we just, it's what was it? John Thompson used to say, I believe it was John Thompson, NCAA so mad at Kentucky, Cleveland State just got another 2 years probation. But, turning out that, no level 1 violations, no suspension for Coach Hardaway, no loss of scholarships, a very minuscule, although it's not going to be as minuscule once you figure in the 0.25% of the basketball budget. But man, Brian, talk about just your slap on the wrist.
Yeah, and I think it's about time too, because Memphis got hit hard, a lot in the past. So, for me, this was, I thought it would be like 4 games, because that's what I heard earlier. But I mean, if you're a Memphis fan, I mean, it's like a big sigh of relief. Now you can just concentrate on going about this season, because I was expecting to have head coach Haith so, for a little bit, but now no, it's not the case. So now they can just worry about this season, and you guys will talk about it tomorrow. But I think this is I think it'd be a sneaky good season for Memphis. The expectations are not as high as they were in years past, and I think they can fly under the radar just a little bit.
Yeah, and Mark Giannotto said it today. Today was probably the biggest win of the Penny Hardaway era so far, and we've joked that this was his biggest recruiting class filled with transfers here. But just a day that Memphis fans, like you said, B, we can just kind of say, okay, well now, and the other thing, and Larry here in just a second, but the other thing that this does is this kind of lifts a cloud off the program in general, not just basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think that football coaches aren't out there saying, hey, you don't want to go to Memphis. They're about to be in NCAA trouble with basketball. And you know how this works, right? When they go to basketball, they come looking at football. That's how coaches operate. But Larry, this kind of raises the cloud off the program in general.
Yes, and there's no doubt that when you have this hanging over one of your two major programs, which men's basketball and college football, it affects both. And we've talked about that, how one program affects the other, right? The success in basketball affects success in football and vice versa. I just want to hear some of the quotes that I wrote down during the Zoom today. And these are exact quotes. More about the failures of the leadership of the university than about the coaching staff. It said the benefits that were provided to the players were determined to not be recruiting benefits. I want to add something on that. I happen to know one of the attorneys for Wiseman. He told me that way back when, that according to the bylaws, what he received was not actually a recruiting benefit. He actually told me that, and they have confirmed that today. Finally, the university failed to fully cooperate, which led to the extended time. But this was not a reflection of the coaching staff, but more on the university. I'm going to tell you guys something. NCAA wanted no parts of this case. And I know you're going to talk about this tomorrow, but the NCAA wanted an out on this case. And I don't exactly know why. I have some ideas. But the facts are the NCAA and the IARP decided that this was all on the university. This had nothing to do with the coaching, and that was their out. They wanted an out for some reason, and you guys can dig deeper into this, but I know two things that I know happened. One of the things was that it was argued before them that there aren't that many people in this city who actually care for kids, especially disadvantaged kids. Penny Hardaway's one of them, and you guys are coming after him. I know for a fact that was said. And I also know that one of the investigators had gotten so aggressive with employees of the university that the university actually took out legal action against them. So I'm not sure what's going. There's a whole lot of if and ands and buts here. But guys, the bottom line is when it all came down, the NCAA wanted no parts of this case, and they just took a convenient out. That's just my opinion.
I'm still stunned. I just, and I understand where you're coming from, but to me, if you're going to, the things that were said about the university, that's lack of institutional control if this is the NCAA. Now, the NCAA created this whole process because everybody, pardon my French, bitched and moaned about how they did things. And they just knew that when they went and got these outsiders that didn't know college sports, that they were going to throw hammers down. Man, that's not how – this has not worked the way the NCAA expected it to. They wanted no part. The IARP, I don't think the NCAA cares, but they wanted no part of making a person who only got into coaching to help a best friend that was dying and who has done more to help kids than just about any. They wanted the IARP wanted nothing to do with that. They looked at the facts and they looked at, okay, where were we then and where are we now? And how do we condemn then for something that is more than allowable now? Like, more than allowable. The only reason my big hesitation with this was, and the only thing that I will not buy, and I don't care if somebody stood here and told me face to face, was that Penny didn't know that Wiseman might be ineligible. I mean, come on. The NCAA, I think I'm remembering this correctly. Like, didn't they put out a graphic on Twitter about it before we played him? Like, his eligibility is still up in the air. I wouldn't do this if I were you. And then we did it anyway. And I think if this would have been the NCAA, Memphis would have been in a world of trouble. But the IARP was just not interested in playing the political game. Like, that's the long and short. They just didn't want to play that game. And they said, you know what? Unless, we find a smoking hot gun with 3 bullets still left in the chamber, then we're going to let this be. And the other thing I think that helps this, that outside of Penny, let's call him the other mitigating factor within the basketball program, got jettisoned to the curb. I think that with that happening, the way that all went down, and then the way that kind of fell off the face of the earth, I think that helped Memphis too, because I think they knew that, Memphis fixed the problem as quickly as they could, because keep in mind, the NOA covered much more than the Wiseman stuff, because Memphis took a very hard line with the Wiseman stuff. And look, we'll be frank, they did not cooperate with the NCAA about the Wiseman stuff. They were very non-cooperative with everybody. They wouldn't return calls, they wouldn't return emails, they wouldn't provide digital copies. They just basically went on a blackout. And that, that's like everybody, and this is going to get whole argument started. They're like, well, hang the banners. And I'm like, yeah, you do that, and the NCAA is going to open up an office in FedEx Forum, and you don't want that. And what Memphis did was they invited the process and said, you know what? Come in, look us over. That NOA included allegations against football, softball, and one of the other Olympic sports. Nothing. So that tells you right there what the IARP process was all about. Was they took one look at this, and Memphis did drag their feet for obvious reasons, and they said, you know what? My only regret is that it took them 18 months to do this, when they probably looked at this day one and went, nope, not doing that. But anyway, so that's going to do it for this week. Again, Isaac and Leon and I are on tomorrow. We will talk a little more about the IARP discussion, and we really are going to break down the basketball schedule. That's kind of the crux of the program tomorrow night. So for the best co-hosts in all the land, Larry Marley and Brian Moss, this is John Maddox signing off, and we will see everybody next week.